Welcome to my spoiler review for The Suicide Squad. Guys, you already know I'm so excited to talk about this movie. But again, this is the spoiler review, so if you have not seen this movie, then, well, spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, then go check out my non-spoiler review where I basically talk about how much I love this movie. And also, if you just want to hear my overall thoughts on, the movie in general, then check that out as well. But today, in this video, for the most part, we're talking about all these deaths because there is a lot of gruesome, violent deaths in this movie. It is called The Suicide Squad for a reason. Don't get too attached. Unfortunately, I did a little bit too much, which made things very sad. But things happened. Things went down, and we are going to be talking about them as well as the post-credit scenes for this film because there's some pretty interesting ones. One that I was not expecting at all, and then the other one that I also wasn't really expecting, but makes sense. So let's go and get into this. And let's start off by talking about Team 1. This is something that based off all the trailers and promotional material that we all kind of theorized about and assumed would be the case, that there would be this first Suicide Squad team that would go in on this mission on the beach and pretty much all of them would die. And that's what happened. Literally all of them died except for Harley Quinn and Rick Flagg, which was really unfortunate because, again, these characters that we saw in these scenes, some of them were pretty cool. Like, I would have liked to have seen more of Javelin and Mongal and TDK. I mean, some of them were really honestly useless, but still would have been cool to be seeing more of them, especially like Pete Davidson as Blackguard. Again, not really a really useful character, but with this amazing cast for this first team, would have been awesome. But let's break them down individually with, of course, the first death of the movie being Weasel. This was such a funny one, but also something that I 100% predicted. Like, if anybody's going to be the first to die, it's got to be Weasel. And he didn't even make it to the beach. He literally couldn't swim, so he just drowned. I was like, alright, he's dead, who's next? And that, of course, was Blackguard. Pete Davidson's Blackguard, another one we 100% predicted based off the trailers where we literally saw him surrendering. And not only did he surrender, but it turns out he actually betrayed the team and called ahead of time to be like, hey, Corto Maltesians, we're coming, so don't kill me and we'll be good. But, of course, that didn't work out for him because then they shot his face off, which was disgusting. But honestly, I'm surprised they didn't focus on it more. Like, it was kind of just like, boom, it happened, and then he was on the ground. And honestly, it wasn't that disturbing, but also was at the same time. But after his death and basically everybody getting exposed there, the whole mission just completely fails, and it's basically just a rapid fire of every single character here dying. And some of them were actually, pretty much all of them were kind of just played off as jokes. Like TDK, they showed off an example of who he was, and it was like, what does TDK stand for? The Detachable Kid. And then he just takes his arms off and then slaps people, and then he ends up getting shot anyway. Same thing for Javelin, which actually I think was pretty cool, though, how you had that scene at the end where, like, as he was dying, he was passing on the Javelin to Harley Quinn. I feel like that was a pretty cool scene there, but then obviously, it was turned into a joke when she was like, oh, finish what you're saying. But then he was dead anyway. Then Mongal as well. She just basically blew up. We never actually saw... Actually, yes, we did see a body because she was on fire. So she's definitely dead. But probably the saddest death of Team 1 is Captain Boomerang. This was really disappointing. But again, something I kind of expected and kind of theorized would happen, but I really didn't want it to be true. But yes, Captain Boomerang, one of the few returning members from the first film, did die in the first 5 minutes of this movie. And again, it was really disappointing because I love Jai Courtney in the role. I love Captain Boomerang. Now the thing about it, he's not really that useful of a character because he just throws boomerangs, but he's like a core member of the Suicide Squad. So I would have loved to have seen him as a bigger role in this movie, or even go on to be a villain in a future Flash movie. That would have been awesome, but now he's dead. And as you saw in my death predictions video, I even theorized, like, oh, he's a tricky fellow, so maybe he'll even, like, fake his death or something. But there's no coming back from this. First of all, he was shot with, it looked like arrows or something. Like, basically, he was already dead. And then on top of that, the helicopter, which blew up Mongal, came down, and then the blades just chopped him up. And, he dead. There's no coming back from that. And again, really disappointing. That he had such a small role in the movie. But again, I kind of expected that was going to be the case. And finally, for Team 1, we of course had Savant, played by Michael Rooker, who just, I mean, I do not blame him. He saw everything go down here. He was like, I'm out here. And he tried to escape, but Waller, aka The Wall, was like, no, you're not getting away. And then boom, there goes his head. So, yeah, and then that actually was pretty funny how, like, the blood from his head in the water did actually turn to, brought to you by Warner Brothers, or whatever it said. So that was kind of funny there. But now the next character that I want to talk about is actually Harley Quinn. She, of course, did not die in this movie, as we all expected. She survived. But, I was kind of disappointed by her character in this movie. I don't know if I would say I was disappointed by her character, but definitely by her story. Because, I love Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. This is her third appearance in the role. I think she's a fantastic Harley Quinn. But her whole side storyline in here, like, it made sense and it was cool, but it was also just, like, so weird and out of place. And I would have really just much rather seen her with the squad rather than off with the general and everything, because it was just weird and it was a very, like, rapist kind of situation, and like she ended up killing the guy anyway, but it was just really weird and I just wasn't really a big fan of it. The Thinker was another, I think he was actually really cool in this movie. Peter Capaldi was an amazing villain for this film. He wasn't the main villain, but he was one of the villains here, and he was really cool. He of course died as well, but I did like the story of like how he's been working with Starro for like 30 years and all that stuff, and it was pretty cool. He didn't really do much, but it was still cool seeing him involved in this story. And right away, actually, before we get into talking about like our main squad and what went down in the rest of the movie, I want to skip ahead to talk about Amanda Waller. This was something I actually really liked about the movie, because, Amanda Waller is such a ruthless character in the comics, and I love how they replicated that in this film, because even when the squad, like, they took down the Thinker and got the drive and everything, and then Waller was like, alright, who cares about Starro destroying the city or whatever, just go home or I'm gonna blow your heads off. I love how she was like fully committed to that, and she really did not care. And then, I guess it was kind of embarrassing that she got knocked out by her crew, but at the same time, it was so true to her character, because Amanda Waller would not back down. She is not the kind of person that would really care about that thing. So I did really like that part of the movie when it comes to Amanda Waller. But now, without further ado, let's get into the big stuff here towards the end of the film with one of the most shocking deaths with Rick Flagg. This is one that I was, in my prediction video, I predicted like, oh, maybe Rick Flagg's gonna die. But at the same time, it was also kind of a joke. Like, I didn't think he would actually die. I kind of just threw it in there because I was like, yeah, somebody else has got to die here. We'll throw in Rick Flagg. But he actually did. And in such a crazy way, because Peacemaker murdered him. Like, Peacemaker in this movie was so crazy because, up until this point, he was like a regular cool character, and he was actually like a funny guy and a real like John Cena in the role and everything. And then all of a sudden he just went full crazy, full cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and he just, he had this side mission from Amanda Waller, very similar to, actually, yesterday I just watched one of the animated Suicide Squad films, Batman Assault on Arkham, and Amanda Waller did the same thing with Killer Frost in that movie, where she gave her her own secret objective alongside the team. So she did the same thing here with Peacemaker and gave him the secret mission to make sure that drive and all that evidence and everything did not leave that building and was destroyed or whatever. So I thought that was a really cool idea to latch in Amanda Waller here and just throw in that other side storyline with like, oh, he had a secret mission and everything. But Peacemaker just went full villain here. And again, all of these characters are villains, but he was truly evil in this scene. And, he's still going by his whole, for peace, and like, I'm gonna do whatever keeps the peace, and it makes sense, and it's in line with his character. And again, while it does make him a really evil character for literally murdering Rick Flagg, it still makes me want to see his own series, because I really want to see his origins and see where this character came from and how it led up to this point. And of course, we're getting that with his own HBO Max series in January. So anyway, yeah, that was just absolutely crazy and insane to see the death of Rick Flagg, because, you know, I wasn't a big fan of the character in the first movie, but I really loved Rick Flagg in this film. Like, Joel Kinnaman's performance in this movie, like, it was really tragic, and, like, you really felt for the character when he was dying. And also that line, his final words, was just so perfect, because he said, like, peacemaker. What a joke, because he literally just killed someone, which, again, is a big point I've been making. Like, killing is kind of the opposite of peace. So that was just such a perfect line that I feel like fits so well there. And it's sad to see Rick Flagg go, but it was such a crazy, awesome way to go out. And then I love how Ratcatcher actually saw the whole thing, and then Peacemaker, like, hunted her down and everything, and then Bloodsport came down. He came to save the day, and he kept his promise of getting Cleo out of there safe, and he shot and killed Peacemaker. Or did he? Because, you know, as we see in the post-credit scene later, but we'll talk about that later. So then after this, all we have left are, of course, Bloodsport, Ratcatcher, King Shark, Harley Quinn, and Polka Dot Man. So we've got our 5-member team getting ready to go up against Starro, and again, defies Amanda Waller's plans, and then her crew takes over, and all that good stuff. John Economos, who's working for her, played by Steve Agee, and yeah, so it was great, and they're going up against Starro, and this was a really cool battle. Starro, is such a crazy character from the comics that I never thought, first of all, that I would see in live action, but the way that he works so well, with the way that he was like, he was an alien, and like the American astronauts found him and brought him to Earth, and they're like, oh, we're gonna weaponize him and all that stuff, and it just kept growing and growing, and then he started spewing out all these mini Starros that would then take over and control people, and you'd have these like Starro zombies, and they'd be able to speak for Starro. That was really cool to see. The only thing that was kind of weird that I wasn't really a big fan of is the fact that, like, once the Starros latch onto people, you couldn't get them off, which is weird because in the comics they come right off. And honestly, I think that was kind of a mistake because, you know, the way they leave it off with Starro in this movie is in a way where Starro dies, but he says something about, like, I was just, like, his last words are, I was just floating in the stars, or something like that. So, I think there's definitely the possibility for there to be, either a whole nother Starro out there in the universe still floating around in space, or for there to be, like, maybe one of these mini Starros who's able to grow up into a big Starro. That could be pretty cool, because, again, Starro is a huge character in the comics that actually went up against the Justice League, and I would love to see that as like a big, almost like Avengers Endgame Justice League level event, where you have like the Justice League taken over by Starros. That would be so awesome to see. But we do, of course, have this final battle between Starro and the Suicide Squad, and of course we have yet another casualty during this scene, and Polka Dot Man. Yeah, Polka Dot Man. This was, probably the worst death of the movie, at least for me, because I love the character of Polka Dot Man. Again, he was a very tragic character. I loved his backstory of how, like, with his mom and everything, with, like, she experimented on him and his brothers and sisters, and he was, like, a really tragic character who, like, just really seemed scared and didn't want to fight everybody. But actually, before I get into talking about his death, I want to talk about his mom, because this whole thing with his mom was really weird, because I remember watching reviews for this movie and everybody saying that Polka Dot Man's relationship with his mom was just, like, really weird. And then when I first saw that first scene in the movie where he was talking about his origin, and I was like, oh, that's not weird. I mean, that's actually a pretty cool origin with, like, how his mom experimented on him and everything. But then it got weird, because then, first of all, in that same scene, it turned out like everybody looks like his mom to him, and then that kept being a thing throughout the movie, that everybody looked like his mom, and it was just really, really weird. Like, it was just really weird, especially like for us to see it, and like when he was at the club dancing it with the ladies and getting it on and everything, and then they all looked like his mom, and then like when Starro was like a giant version of his mom, it was just really weird. And then especially when you bring it to his death, again, because he was such a tragic character that I really liked, and I love seeing him as a character using his powers, which, by the way, I think pretty much every time he used his powers in this movie we saw in the trailers already, and he just gets squished. He's like, I'm a superhero, and then he gets squished by Star, and it was just played off as a joke. In my death predictions, I did predict that this character was going to die, but I thought it would be a cool, like, heroic sacrifice or anything, or even just, like, go out in a cool way. But no, it's literally just played off as a joke. And I really was not a big fan of that, especially because he was a cool character that really didn't even do that much in this movie. I would have loved to have seen more of him, and I'd love to see him get his own prequel series or movie for HBO Max or whatever, because I think he'd be a really cool character if they just did more with him and didn't kill him off so easily, because he easily, if he wanted to fight, he definitely could have taken out Starro on his own very, very easily. So, yeah, wasn't really the biggest fan of how Polka Dot Man went out, but I still did really like seeing David Dastmalchian in the role and seeing him use his powers and everything. But now, I think, yeah, that's the last death of the movie. Now, before we get into talking about the post-credit scenes, let's talk about the surviving members. So, King Shark was really cool here. I feel like he was honestly kind of an idiot, and you know, I definitely would prefer the more ferocious, more competent version of King Shark, but I still liked him. He's definitely the Groot of this movie, and plus it's Sylvester Stallone, so you can't really complain too much. Bloodsport was really cool. I liked his story. I do wish that his story with his daughter would have gotten more of a conclusion, though, because, you know, like, we had them fighting at the beginning, and then you saw her seeing him on TV and everything, and that was cool, but then that was the last time you saw in the movie. I wish there would have been maybe a scene at the end where they reunited, and it was like, hey, I'm out of prison, and you're not going to jail. Like, that would have been really cool, but they kind of just ended it off really abruptly. And then finally, Ratcatcher 2 was, I think, actually my favorite character of the movie. I liked her even more than Polka Dot Man because, first of all, she didn't die and she wasn't made into a joke. She was a really cool character, and she really, truly is the heart of this movie. And Daniela Melchior, who played the character, she's, like, relatively new to Hollywood. This is, I think, like, her first big movie she's ever done, and she was so amazing in the role. Like, first of all, her acting ability, and then just the character in general was so cool. Seeing those flashbacks with her father, of course, played by Taika Waititi, the original Ratcatcher, was just really cool to see. I loved her character, which, you know, back when it was first announced that Ratcatcher was going to be in this movie, I was not all looking forward to it. Not a big fan of rats, but her and Sebastian and all the other rats were awesome in this movie. I loved them, and they, like, pretty much single-handedly took down Starro with a little help from Harley, but still, it was so awesome, and I loved Ratcatcher, and honestly, I'd love for her to get her own HBO Max series or some kind of spin-off as well, because she was just such a great character. But now, guys, finally, let's talk about the post-credit scenes for the Suicide Squad. There's two of them. One that happens, like, right after the movie ends, where we go back to the beach of Corto Maltese from the beginning. Weasel is not dead, and this was just, like, it was just supposed to be, like, a funny thing, and I don't think it's ever going to come back. I highly doubt that we're ever going to see Weasel again, but, you know, at least he's out there, and, you know, it really is a joke. Like, of course, he's the one that survives. The first death of the movie wasn't even a real death, and then the same thing happens in the second post-credit scene, where another death is reversed as well. Because we see John Economos and Jennifer Holland's character, I don't remember her character's name, but they go to, like, the ER or some kind of hospital, and they see that Peacemaker is somehow alive. And I was kind of surprised by this, because, again, we know Peacemaker is a prequel, so this is setting up for the Peacemaker series, but at the same time, he's also, you know, the first season takes place in the past anyway. So, as I was talking about in my death prediction video, I have a feeling that this could be maybe because the first season of Peacemaker could end off to set up what happened in the Suicide Squad, and then maybe if it does eventually get renewed for a second season, then that would take place after this post-credit scene, because we know both John Economos and Jennifer Holland's character are two of the stars of the Peacemaker series. So, I thought it was a really cool way to set it up, but again, also just really confusing because that series is a prequel and that's been officially confirmed. So I don't know, we'll kind of have to see how that ends up going. But, yeah, so guys, overall, I really did enjoy the Suicide Squad. There was a lot of death, a lot of death, and I feel like a lot of the characters were done really well. You know, I had my problems, but overall, I really enjoyed this movie, and again, I'm super excited to see what comes in the future with not only the Peacemaker HBO Max series, but again, hopefully some other possible spin-offs, like maybe a Ratcatcher 2 HBO Max series, or a prequel with Polka Dot Man. Either would be awesome, but I'm really excited to see the future. I'll be doing some other videos on the Suicide Squad the next couple days as well, so stay tuned for that. But guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the Suicide Squad, all the deaths, and everything that went down? So thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the DC life.